Hello students, welcome back to Scholar IAS current affairs classes. Hope you are all set. So without any delay, let's start the classes. The first article is on cyclone forecast. This is an article from Indian Express paper. This is related to your geography subject under GS1 paper. Okay. You guys would have come across the name Niver, right? It was a cyclone that was formed few days back in the Bay of Bengal. So the good thing about this cyclone is that it did not make much of destruction of property or human life, unlike the cyclone Amphan in West Bengal. So this is what the news is. We will see some details regarding this cyclone. Okay. First thing that we will try to understand is how these cyclones are forecasted. So the IMD, that is the Indian Meteorological Department, has set up a network of Doppler weather radar. Okay, this is a type of radar that is used for weather forecast. So these type of radars have been set up along the India's coastal line. What these radars do is basically these send out pulse of radio waves. Okay, these radio waves are sent to analyze the size and speed of the movement of water droplets, and based on this data, the data that has been collected from this radars, IMDB also collaborates with other meteorological agencies. They also collect data from other meteorological agencies of the other countries like Japan and US, and based on these data they will collect and feed these data into a climate model, okay, to forecast the cyclone. So based on this, the whole idea about whether it is a severe cyclone or very severe cyclone, what the speed of the cyclone would be, these things are analyzed. Unlike the cyclone Gati in Arabian Sea, the cyclone Niver in Bay of Bengal was easy to track. Let's try to understand why it was easy. See, first of all, the cyclones are basically categorized based on their wind speed. First, when they initially categorized Niver, it was categorized as a cyclonic storm. So basically, the speed was around 62 km. That was the forecast. But later it transformed into a very severe cyclonic storm with wind speeds going up to 222 km per hour. Anyway, this fact is not important for us. What you have to know is the cyclones are categorized based on their speed, wind speed. Okay. So let's come back to the point where we are trying to understand why it was easy to track Niver. The first thing is, Bay of Bengal actually is more prone to cyclonic activity than the Arabian Sea. But despite that, this cyclone Niver that was formed in Bay of Bengal was easy to track because unlike in Arabian Sea, where the cyclones actually recurve and move back in, this doesn't happen in terms of in Bay of Bengal. So it was more possible to forecast the path of the cyclone itself. Second thing is, there are more radars along the India's east coast than the west coast, that is basically along the Bay of Bengal coastline than the Arabian Sea coastline. So these two factors play a major role in tracking the cyclone Niver. Now let's try to understand the measures taken to reduce the losses from a cyclone. Okay, normally before cyclones form, a depression is created. Let it be Bay of Bengal or Arabian Sea, first a depression forms. But one thing is that not all depression turn into a cyclone. But irrespective of whether the depression is turning into a cyclone or not, the coastal areas that are estimated or are expected to face huge destruction from a possible cyclone are alerted first. Next is that normally these cyclonic activity areas, the areas where the cyclonic activity takes place, these have a very good catch of fish. Okay, so what happens, fishermen take this as an opportunity and try to go for fishing during cyclonic activity. So what happens is, the meteorological agencies that give advisories on fish catches suspend advisories during storm formation, so that the fishermen would not have much information and they won't get into the danger. So that way they prevent fishermen from getting stuck in the cyclones. Okay, and second thing is, the IMDB also issues flood forecast. So it's not just about the cyclones affecting the coastline alone. The floods, if in urban areas, floods happen. We normally know that. We have seen many areas. In Mumbai it happened, in Chennai it happened. So IMDB issues flood forecast maps along with in collaboration with the urban bodies for cities as well as areas that would experience maximum crop damage. So these kind of measures taken by the meteorological agencies help to reduce the losses. So this is what it is about cyclone forecast, students. Let's move on to the next article. The second article is related to Ayurvedic doctors. This is an article from the Hindu. This is related to your social justice topic in GS2 paper. Okay, that is why we are going to cover this. First, let's understand what is in the news. The Ayush Ministry has actually made an amendment to 2016 regulation related to Indian Medicine Central Council. Okay, so under this amendment, the amendment allows PG students of Ayurveda to practice general surgery. This is what the news is about. Let's try to understand various aspects associated with this amendment, starting with the issues. The reason for government to come up with this amendment are two things basically. One is currently only allopathic doctors are allowed to perform surgery and Ayurvedic doctors are not. They are restricted. And second thing is there is shortage and unwillingness of allopathic doctors to serve in rural areas. So there is shortage of doctors in rural areas as well. These two reasons have pushed the government, Ayush Ministry in particular, to go for this amendment. Now let's see the pros and cons of this amendment. The first thing is the postgraduate students who are right now being allowed to perform general surgery already have a 3-year course. So this amendment doesn't make much change in this. They basically formalize the existing practice. So there is nothing new practice is not being brought into place, rather it is being formalized and a clarity is being given. Second thing is that if we bring in the Ayurvedic doctors, it would complement the existing allopathic treatment in rural areas, as well as it would enhance the rural healthcare system. Even for some invasive procedures that require specialized training and knowledge, these doctors, that is the Ayurvedic doctors, can be trained. It is not that difficult. Okay, but there is one issue or one con associated with this. The IMA, that is the Indian Medical Association, is very cautious, and they are demanding that certain standards and outcomes has to be put in place, so that in the interest of the patient's safety, the non-allopathic doctors can be monitored and the surgeries that they perform can be formally inquired. So this would bring in a safety. This gives a safety feeling for the patients. So associated with this is the rural healthcare system itself. So the broader idea behind this amendment is to enhance the rural healthcare system. So in addition to this amendment, what are the measures have been taken by the government to promote the rural healthcare system? Let's see them. So one thing is that certain measures like rural bonds, quota for rural seats in post graduation PG, and increase in number of medical colleges and post graduation seats. These are some measures that have been taken by the government. And next thing is the mid-level healthcare provider service, like community health centers at rural level or at panchayat level. These are taking a shape of preventive healthcare system. They are giving an opportunity for curative healthcare in rural areas. So the advantage of having such a system, such community healthcare centers at rural level, is that they reduce the pressure on tertiary hospitals, because tertiary hospitals can concentrate. If these healthcare systems take the load at rural areas, they would reduce the pressure on tertiary hospitals to concentrate more on high risk cases rather than these chota cases. Okay, so this is the broader idea around this amendment. Students, a direct question cannot be asked on this amendment, but you can use this amendment in your points when a question is asked around rural healthcare system. So make sure you are grasping the amendment as well as the analysis of it. Okay. The third article is related to your Paris Agreement. This is an article from IE again, Indian Express. This is related to your subject environment in GS3 paper. Okay, they have a section called conservation, environmental pollution degradation, and environmental impact assessment. The main concern is that the measures taken to bring down the global temperature rise to below 2 degrees Celsius is very insignificant, insufficient. At either national level, let it be national level or international level, it's seen as these steps that have been taken are seen as insufficient. And next thing is, this Paris Agreement also rejects the principle of common but differentiated responsibility as well as polluter pays principle. So these are the two concerns that are around this Paris Agreement. before we see get more into the Paris Agreement, let's try to understand some other multilateral treaties that have come before Paris Agreement. The first one we can see is the Stockholm Conference of 1972, and second one is the Rio Conference of 1992. So these are earlier steps taken to tackle the global warming itself. And followed this was the UNFCCC, that is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So these instruments basically try to bring a balance between development as well as the environment protection. These treaties try to maintain that balance. These instruments also led to huge financial package for development of environment friendly technologies. But the actual problem started with Kyoto Protocol. So what happened here is this protocol made developed countries to fix their emission targets. So this led to US to withdraw its support from the Kyoto Protocol. That's what US does, we know that. And following this, there was Copenhagen Accord in 2009. This led to failure of talks between developed and developing nations. There was a tussle between these two nations who has to control their emissions. This tussle spilled over and Copenhagen Accord broke down, and developed nations felt that the global climate action plan can be actually achieved only when voluntary reductions are put in place rather than some fixed targets. There has to be voluntary reductions from the nations itself. That was their objective. But developed nations do that for their own, to protect their own interest rather than protecting the environment. These being the issues around the previous treaties, Paris Agreement brought a fundamental change in the principle of the previous treaties. That is, in this treaty there was a common standpoint. All the nations came to a common standpoint, but the issue was that they did not accept to the principle of CBDR, that is the common but differentiated responsibility principle. Here in this Paris Agreement, the nations were asked to go for a nationally determined contribution. So here there was no any fixed restriction on the emissions target. Rather, they were given voluntary targets which they themselves can fix. But these kind of voluntary targets actually doesn't pave way for limiting the global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius. That is not possible to achieve that with voluntary contributions. And this also affects the development of developing nations, because the parity that they are trying to bring in through this Paris Agreement is not fair for developing nations. So the agreement also does not provide any penal instruments. See, even if you are giving voluntary contributions, there has to be some sort of penal penalty that the country has to pay so that they don't miss out on their own targets. But no such thing has been put in place. This also affects the Paris Agreement's efficiency. So overall, the Paris Agreement as an agreement to control the global warming is ineffective. Inefficiency of Paris Agreement is going to have an global impact. See, IPCC, that is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, actually stated that even if a temperature rise of 1.5 degrees Celsius would have a catastrophic impact and irreversible changes in the environment itself. And IPCC also said that it could lead to a destruction of 70 to 90% of coral reefs, okay, around the world. It's not just restricted to one particular country, rather the whole globe is going to suffer from this temperature rise. And IPCC also stated that unless there is any complete transformation happening, that to two fronts, that is economy as well as the society, then restricting the climate change is not going to be possible. So any change that happens has to happen at economic as well as societal front. So students, we have come to the end of this session. Hope you like the classes. For more videos, please subscribe to our channel. Also visit our website scholar.com. Happy learning. See you. Bye bye.